Harald Hardrada had survived exile, battle, empire, and kings. Then England killed him in one afternoon. On September 25th in the year 1066, a Norwegian king walked into a field east of York, thinking England was almost in his hand. He had already beaten the northern earls. York had bent. Hostages were expected. Supplies were expected. The campaign was moving exactly the way a veteran warlord wanted it to move. Then dust started rising on the road from the west. It was not a supply train. It was Harold Godwinson, King of England, the man Harold had come to remove. And the terrifying part was this: Harald Hardrada was not some reckless pirate who got lucky once. He was around 51 years old for a battlefield king, rich, famous, dangerous, a man who had fought from Norway to Kyiv to Constantinople to the Mediterranean and back again, a man who had served emperors, a man who had survived politics that killed almost everyone else around him. This was not a random Viking raid. This was a professional survivor of power coming for the biggest prize in the north. And please subscribe to help this channel grow. It helps a lot. Now back to the nightmare. England in 1066 was not just waiting for William of Normandy. That is the movie version most people know. The arrow in the eye, the Bayeux tapestry, the Norman conquest, the whole school textbook ending where Saxon England gets buried at Hastings. But before Hastings there was another invasion, a colder one, a northern one, a Viking one. And for a few days it looked as if the last great Viking claimant to England might actually win. The English King Edward the Confessor died in January 1066. He left behind a throne that several dangerous men believed belonged to them. This is the kind of succession mess that makes Game of Thrones look almost organized. No dragons needed, just family claims, dead-odd promises, revenge, and men with armies. The first man was Harold Godwinson. He was the most powerful noble in England. He had money, lend brothers, soldiers, and the support of the English political machine. The moment Edward died, Harold moved fast. He was crowned in London on January 6th. Speed mattered. In medieval politics, if you stood around politely waiting for everyone to agree, you usually ended up dead or irrelevant. The second man was William, Duke of Normandy. William claimed Edward had promised him the throne years earlier. He also claimed Harold had sworn to support him. English sources and Norman sources do not tell the same story because medieval propaganda was not subtle. Everybody wrote history with a knife behind the page. The third man was Harald Hardrada, King of Norway. His claim was messier. It came through old Scandinavian royal agreements and the memory of the time when Danish and Norwegian kings had ruled or claimed England. It was not clean. It was not modern legal paperwork. But in 1066, a claim did not need to be clean if the man making it had ships and killers. And Harold had both. To understand why he dared to cross the North Sea, you have to rewind hard. Before he was the last Viking king in England, he was a wounded teenager running for his life. Harold Sigurdsson was born around 1015 in Norway. Later people called him Hardrada. It means hard ruler. That name fits so well it almost sounds invented by a screenwriter who got paid too much. But the basic point is real. Harold built his life on force. He was not gentle with enemies. He did not treat power as a polite game. At around 15, he fought beside his half-brother Olaf Haraldsson at the Battle of Stiklestad in 1030. Olaf had been king of Norway. He wanted power back. The battle went badly. Olaf was killed. Harold was wounded. The teenage Harold escaped. Think about that for a second. His first major political lesson was not a speech from an old mentor. It was watching the cause of his own king collapse in blood and panic. His half-brother became Saint Olaf later. Harold became something else. Not a saint, not even close. He became a man who learned that defeat only mattered if it killed you. He fled east into the world of the Rus. That meant the great eastern routes tied to Kyiv.rivers.trade, warriors.princes, and money. He entered the service of Yaroslav the Wise, Grand Prince of Kyiv. This was not some random hiding place. Kyiv in the 11th century was a major power center. It connected Scandinavia with Byzantium and the Black Sea. It was one of the places where a young warrior with nerve could turn exile into a career. Harald did exactly that. He became a military man in a world where service could pay better than bloodline. He fought. He gained rank. He learned how powerful courts worked. He saw how deals were made. He saw how men smiled at dinner and destroyed one another afterward. He was not just learning war, he was learning empire. Then he went farther, south to Constantinople. Today we call it Istanbul. Back then Constantinople was the capital of the Byzantine Empire. To a young Scandinavian warrior it must have felt unreal. Huge walls, old Roman wealth-dot churches covered in gold. Officials who could kill you through paperwork. Emperors who needed foreign bodyguards, because local politics could turn poisonous in one night. Harold joined the Varangian Guard. That was the elite foreign guard of the Byzantine emperors. It included men from Scandinavia, and later many Anglo-Saxons too. These were not background extras holding spears behind a throne. They were hard-paid professional fighters. In a court full of plots, the emperor wanted men whose loyalty came from pay, prestige, and distance from local factions. Harold fit that world. The sagas make his time there sound almost too wild. Campaigns in the Mediterranean, fighting in Sicily, fighting against Bulgarians, palace intrigue, prison Dax, treasure. Whether every dramatic detail is true is another question. Medieval saga writers loved a legendary glow, but the core picture is strong. Harold spent years in Byzantine service and returned north with a reputation that normal kings could not fake. He had seen the richest empire in Europe from the inside. He had fought for emperors. He had earned a fortune. That matters, because a king without money is just a man with a title and problems. Harold came back with treasure, the kind of wealth that buys ships, pays soldiers, opens doors to change his marriage prospects, and makes old enemies suddenly very respectful. He also married Elisive, the daughter of Yaroslav of Kyiv. That marriage tied him to one of the most important dynastic networks in Eastern Europe. Agan Harold was not just swinging an axe in a muddy field. He was moving through power systems from Norway to Kyiv to Constantinople. This is why calling him just a Viking raider misses the real danger. A raider hits a target and leaves. Harold came to rule. When he returned to Scandinavia in the mid-10th 40s, he pushed his way into Norwegian politics. His nephew Magnus the Good was king of Norway and Denmark. Harold had money and military prestige. Magnus had legitimacy. For a short time they shared power. Then Magnus died in 1047, and Harold became sole king of Norway. Now the survivor became the ruler, and the ruler became exactly what his nickname promised. Harold spent years fighting for Denmark against King Svein Estridsson. The war dragged on. Raids, naval, fighting pressure, bargaining. More ships, more burned settlements. More men dead for a crown that never quite became his. By 1064 he accepted peace with Svein and gave up the Danish struggle. That matters too, because by 1066 Harold was not a young man chasing his first glory. He was an aging king who had spent decades trying to expand his power. Denmark had resisted him. Norway was his. The West still offered one huge prize. England. England was rich. England had towns, mints, farms, ports, churches, taxes, silver. It was not a frozen side quest. It was the jackpot. And Harold had a useful doorway into the whole thing. His name was Tostig Godwinson. Tostig was the exiled brother of Harold Godwinson. He had been Earl of Northumbria, but the North hated his rule badly enough that rebellion pushed him out in 1065. Harold chose political survival over family loyalty and accepted Tostig's removal. So Tostig became exactly the kind of man every kingdom fears, a noble with a grievance foreign contacts, and nothing left to lose. A bitter brother is dangerous. A bitter brother with access to a foreign king is a national emergency. Tostig tried to stir trouble before Harold arrived. He raided along the English coast. He looked for support. He went north. He connected with Harold. The offer was simple enough. Help me break my brother and I help you take England. After that I get my old power back. It is brutal, it is personal, and it is very medieval. So in September 1066, Harald Hardrada sailed. The fleet size in sources is usually given around 250 to 300 ships. Do not picture one tiny band of bearded troublemakers hopping out of a boat for a quick monastery robbery. This was an invasion force, thousands of men, ships crossing the North Sea, the old Viking highway back in use. Harold first moved along the northeast coast. He joined with Tostig. Then the combined force sailed into the Humber and up the River Ouse. They landed at Recall south of York. For your map, this route matters. Norway across the North Sea, the northeast coast of England, the Tyne area, then south toward the Humber, then up the Ouse, then Recall, then York. Every movement was aimed at the same thing. Crack the north before Harold Godwinson could react from the south. And at first it worked. The English northern earls Edwin of Mercia and Morcar of Northumbria moved to block the invaders. On September 20th, 1066, the armies met at Fulford just south of York. Fulford was ugly, not cinematic ugly where everyone gets a dramatic close-up and one perfect speech. Real ugly, a hard fight near low ground and water. The English tried to hold, the Norwegians pressed. The line shifted, men got trapped. Men ran. The northern English army broke. Harold and Tostig won. York was exposed. Now here is the part a lot of quick retellings get wrong. Harold did not simply storm York and turn it into a smoking ruin. He negotiated. The city surrendered or agreed terms. Hostages and supplies were to be handed over. That is important because it shows Harold thinking as a king. He did not need to destroy a city he expected to own. Destroying York would be bad business. Taking York alive was smart. After Fulford, Harold had every reason to feel confident. The local army had been smashed. York was bending. The English king was far away in the south because William of Normandy was also threatening England from across the Channel. Harold could think he had time. That thought killed him. Harold Godwinson had been watching the south coast for William. Then news came from the north. The Norwegian king had landed. Fulford had been lost. York was in danger or already surrendered. This is the moment where Harold Godwinson did something insane and brilliant. He turned north, fast. The traditional story says he pushed his army about 185 miles from London toward Yorkshire in less than a week. Some details are debated by historians: the speed, the exact route, the use of mounted troops, and how many men came from where. But the strategic fact remains brutal. Harold appeared in the north before Harold expected him. That is the whole battle. Surprise. Harald Hardrada was waiting near Stamford Bridge east of York on September 25th. His men were not lined up for a major battle. The purpose was probably to receive hostages and supplies after the surrender agreement. Many had left heavier armor back with the ships at Recall because the day was warm and the job did not look dangerous. That sounds stupid until you remember what they believed. They had just won at Fulford. York had submitted. The English king was supposed to be far away. The local northern army was beaten. No one expected a full royal army to appear on the road. Then Harold Godwinson arrived. Imagine being one of Harold's men near the Derwent. You expect carts, usages. Maybe local nobles trying to look calm while hating you. Instead, you see weapons, banners, English troops, and the king himself. It is one of the great surprise attacks of medieval history. The two kings had almost the same name, Harold of Norway and Harold of England. That alone is annoying for viewers and brutal for narrators. So keep it clear. Harold with an A is the Norwegian. Harold with an O is the English king. The English king had caught the Norwegian king exposed. Later saga tradition gives us a famous scene before the fighting. Harold Godwinson supposedly offered Tostig peace and the return of his earldom if he abandoned Harold. Tostig then asked what Harold would give the King of Norway. The answer was a grave. 7 feet of English ground because Harold was taller than other men. It is a savage line. It may not be literal history, but it captures the mood perfectly. There was no deal coming. Not after Fulford, not after York. Not after Tostig brought a foreign invasion into his brother's kingdom. The battle began around the crossing of the river Derwent. The famous legend says one huge Norwegian axeman held the bridge alone and stopped the English from crossing until an English soldier went under the bridge and stabbed him from below. It is one of those stories that sounds designed for a movie trailer. Maybe it happened, maybe it grew in the telling. Either way, the point is believable. The crossing slowed the English long enough for the Norwegians to form some kind of defense. Harald Hardrada reacted fast. This is where his experience mattered. A lesser commander might have collapsed right there. Harold had been surprised. His men were not properly prepared. His army was divided because reinforcements were still back near the ships. But he formed a shield wall and fought. The Vikings did not instantly run. They held. For a while, it may even have looked as if they could turn the disaster around. Harold was still Harold. He had not survived half the known world by freezing when plans broke. He moved aggressively. The sagas picture him going forward in a blue tunic without mail, swinging his weapon, pushing the fight. Again, we have to treat details from later saga, writing carefully. But the broader picture fits. Harold was a battle king. He led from the front, and then England got him. An arrow hit him in the throat. That was it. No grand final duel, no slow speech, no throne room confession. The man who had survived Stiklestad, Kyiv, Constantinople, Mediterranean War, Scandinavian politics, and decades of kingship was taken out in a field near York by a missile he probably never saw clearly. That is the shock of the story, not that Harold died. Everyone dies. The shock is that a life built across empires ended in one sudden afternoon because he misread the timing of one enemy king. When Harold fell, the Norwegian army lost more than a commander. It lost the entire logic of the invasion. Tostig was still there. Men could still fight. Reinforcements could still arrive. But the royal claim had a hole in its throat. Harold Godwinson offered terms again according to later accounts. Tostig refused. The fighting continued. Then came the men from the ships. Eystein Orri led reinforcements from recall. They had rushed several miles to the battlefield. Some had probably run in armor under heat and pressure. The sagas call the counterattack Orri Storm. Great name. Terrible situation. Exhausted men slammed into a battle that was already going wrong. For a moment, fresh Norwegians may have pushed hard. Then exhaustion caught them. The English held. The Norwegian force broke. Tostig died. Eystein Orri died. The invasion collapsed into killing. The numbers from medieval sources are always dangerous. Do not trust them as clean accounting. But the scale of defeat is clear in one famous detail. The Norwegian fleet had arrived with around 250 to 300 ships. The survivors supposedly needed only 24 ships to go home. Even if the exact numbers are shaped by storytelling, the message is unmistakable. This was not a setback, this was destruction. Harold Godwinson had won a stunning victory. In another year, this would have made him legendary forever. He had destroyed a major invasion, killed a foreign king, rushed his rebel brother, saved York, and cut the Scandinavian claim to England down in a single day. But 1066 was not done with him. 3 days after Stamford Bridge, William of Normandy landed on the south coast at Pevensey. Think about the timing. Harold defeats the Viking invasion on September 25th. William lands on September 28th. It is almost cruel. One emergency ends and another walks out of the sea. Harold had to turn south again. The traditional version has him rushing down the length of England toward London and then Hastings. Modern discussion has added nuance about routes and ships and how the movement may have worked. But the pressure is not debated. Harold had just fought in Yorkshire and now had to face a fresh Norman invasion in Sussex. On October 14, 1066, Harold Godwinson fought William near Hastings. This time Harold died. William won, and the map of England changed forever. Here is the part that makes Harald Hardrada more than a side character. He lost before Hastings. But his invasion helped shape the world William conquered. Stamford Bridge pulled Harold north. It forced a major campaign before the Norman landing. It killed men, drained time, cracked urgency, and left the English king making decisions under extreme pressure. Would William still have won if Stamford Bridge never happened? Nobody can prove that cleanly. Be careful with anyone who says yes or no with too much confidence. History is not a video game where one battle gives a fixed stamina penalty. Harold was still a capable commander. His army at Hastings was still strong enough to hold for most of the day. William almost failed. The Norman victory was not automatic, but Stamford Bridge mattered. It gave William a window. It made England fight 2 invasions in the same month. It turned the year 1066 into a 3-way crisis where the first loser still changed the final result. And that is why Harald Hardrada is remembered as the last great Viking king who tried to take England, not the last Viking ever, not the exact final second of the Viking Age across the whole world. That is too neat, too clean. Historians argue about where the Viking Age begins and ends, because real history does not stop when a narrator wants a dramatic sentence. But in England, Stamford Bridge became the symbolic end of the Viking Age. The old northern claim came back one last time. It came with a king who had lived the full violent range of the Viking world: Norway, Rus, Byzantium, the Mediterranean, Denmark. England, it came with ships and ambition and an exiled English brother hungry for revenge. Then it died beside the river Derwent. The wildest thing is that Harold almost makes sense. When you look at his life, the invasion does not look random. It looks like the final move of a man who had always survived by moving toward danger before danger finished organizing itself. At 15, he loses at Stiklestad and runs east. In Kyiv, he turns exile into service. In Constantinople, he turns service into wealth. In Norway, he turns wealth into kingship. In Scandinavia, he turns kingship into war. In 1066, he sees England divided and moves. That pattern had worked for him for decades, until Harold Godwinson moved faster. That is the real duel at Stamford Bridge, not axe against sword. Not Viking against Saxon in some simple cartoon version. It is timing against timing. Harold believed he had time to receive York's surrender properly. Harold proved he did not. And for a king who built a life on hard decisions, that was enough. There is another uncomfortable detail here. Harold was not only defeated by English strength, he was defeated by success. Fulford made him confident. York made him comfortable. The surrender process made the next step feel administrative of hostages, dock supplies control. He had moved from battle mode into occupation mode too early. That is a classic mistake. You win the first fight and start acting as if the second fight is paperwork. Then the second fight walks onto the road with spears. Modern viewers know this rhythm from every crime movie, where the crew pulls off the robbery and relaxes before the getaway is actually done. Harold had won the robbery. He had not left the building. And Harold Godwinson kicked the door open. The tragedy is sharp because Harold was not foolish. He was experienced, maybe too experienced. He had seen so much that he trusted his reading of the board. The local enemy was beaten. The English king was far away. William was holding Harold's attention in the south. York was ready to deal. The plan was logical. Then the impossible thing happened quickly enough to become real. That is what makes Stamford Bridge frightening. It is not a story about a dumb man making a dumb mistake. It is a story about a brilliant, violent survivor making a reasonable calculation and still dying because his opponent did something extraordinary. Harald Hardrada had spent his life around rulers who waited too long. He was not one of them. But on that September day, Harold Godwinson was even faster. The armor problem matters because it makes the scene painfully human. Chain mail is heavy. Marching and waiting in it is exhausting. If you believe you are not about to fight a major battle, you leave it near the ships. That is not cartoon stupidity. That is men making a practical choice based on the information they have. The information was wrong. That is how armies die. Not always through cowardice, not always through bad weapons, sometimes through one wrong assumption. Harold's entire career had trained him to punish other people's wrong assumptions. At Stamford Bridge, he paid for his own, and the payment was final. After the battle, the surviving Norwegians were allowed to leave under Olaf, Harold's son. The invasion was over. Norway did not get England. Tostig did not get Northumbria back. Harold did not get the crown. York did not become the doorway to a new Scandinavian England. Instead, the road opened toward Hastings. William of Normandy became William the Conqueror. Norman French entered the ruling class of England. Castles rose, lands changed hands. Noble families were broken. English law and language changed under pressure from a new elite. The consequences reached far beyond one battlefield, and Harald Hardrada stands just before that turn. The last northern storm before the Norman one. Stamford Bridge was the afternoon when survival ran out. The final image should not be a young berserker screaming into glory that is too cheap. Picture an older king, tested by half a century of war and politics. A man carrying the memory of Norway, Kyiv, Constantinople, Sicily, Denmark, and every bargain that made him rich enough and feared enough to cross the sea. He steps into England believing the crown is still possible. By sunset, his army is ruined, his ally is dead, his claim is gone, his body is on English ground, and the English king who killed him has less than 3 weeks to live. So when people say Harold was the last Viking king, they are usually reaching for this moment. Not because every Scandinavian expedition suddenly stopped, not because the Viking world vanished overnight, but because Stamford Bridge feels like the last time the old Viking claim to England came in full royal form and got answered by an English king in the field. The answer was brutal. No, Harold came across the North Sea with a lifetime of victories behind him. England gave him one afternoon, and that was enough.